When a book speaks to your ideological reality to the point that you can actually identify and resonate with it, then that book is a book that I consider a must read. In this case, this is a book that I consider a must read. Steve Biko was way ahead of his time when he took the time to write all the speeches and memoirs and deliveries that he actually did when it comes to the consolidation of this book. This is generations after Steve Biko's time. So I look forward basically to sharing with you what I think and feel around Steve Biko's writing, how he has helped me understand my identity and my ideological output as a Black person, but also how it's important to know your identity and be in tune with that particular identity. I like this book for a number of reasons. Steve touches on a number of subjects. He looks not only at the political landscape and how it affected the Black people around the time of apartheid South Africa, but he also looks at religion and how churches can play an influence somehow in the running of society from the perspective of a layman. He looks at the geopolitical landscape, the neighboring community around South Africa, like mindedness. He also looks at what's under the skin, be it black or white, and how each party and each race can actually play a role in contributing to the winning of the Black community. Thus, he came up with the concept of Black consciousness. But in reading this book and in doing this specific video, I want to look at 5 lessons that I can extrapolate from Steve Biko's writings that can benefit us moving forward so that we see what we can use, what we can leave behind in the past, but also what we can take to the future to emancipate the Black people of the future, generations after us, so that we still maintain an identity that is worth noticing but also worth remembering. So, what is the first lesson? I feel that the first lesson that I took from Steve Biko's book is knowing yourself, knowing your identity. As the old adage, nosete ipsam, which is French, says, know thyself. As a Black nation, Steve Biko in chapter 9 emphasizes the concept of Black consciousness, where he defines it step by step for the masses that he was addressing in that particular setting, but also for us, the future generations who get to read the book, idealize around his concepts and what he thought the future would look like, but also how he looked upon himself to emancipate the Black mind so that you are in a place that resonates with how the future of Black people should be. Everything starts with a foundation. You need to know yourself before you can play a particular role that is positive in the world in which you live, thrive, reside in, and actually have an output and contribution towards. So know yourself in your community, in your specific space. Know the role that you are playing for the benefit of yourself, your family, your close-knit community, and those around you. As long as you have that particular foundation of who you are as a Black child, then only will you be able to imagine and picture the output of everything being possible amongst the things that you imagine, as well as the lived reality in which you are in. And if every Black person was to know themselves, embrace themselves, identify with who they are, then we as a Black nation overall would be better positioned to make a more meaningful contribution into the world. So that's lesson number 1. Know yourself. Know your identity. Identify with a particular subset of the cultural community and then move forward with a particular common goal. Lesson 2 is taken from chapter 10 of Steve Biko's book. In this chapter, Steve addresses some church leadership members within the community, right? He does this in order to portray to them how a lay person sees religion and how a lay person sees the role that religion and spirituality can play within the fight that they had at that particular time of apartheid South Africa. Steve not only nitpicks, but picks apart Christianity. He picks apart the other various types of religions and spiritual beliefs, and also looks at it by highlighting to them the commonalities around what spirituality is and the commonalities around the various religions, and how at the core they have particular subset of similarities and commonalities. One of them is that they all believe in a higher being. They may label that higher being differently. It may be God, it may be Jesus Christ, it may be the Holy Spirit, it may be spirituality in some other shape or form, but he labels it to say there's a commonality whereby there is always that spiritual being that each and every religion would believe in. Then there's also the commonality in terms of how each religion has a particular set of rules, a set of rules that they follow, a set of rules that lead and guides the very rituals and practices that reside within that particular religion. And then there's also commonalities around structures within church forums, within the bigger church itself, within the religious denominations and dominions. So the structural output of it. This chapter is significant because in this chapter, Steve is essentially saying that every part of society has a particular role that it needs to play. So whether you believe in a particular thing or not, you must know that each and every segment of society has a role to play towards the common goals of society at large. So during Steve's time, the common goal was the emancipation of the black people, right? In our time, it's the emancipation of black people from economic lockdown, from economic exclusion, from economic non-participation. So if you look at the fact that church has strong moral structures that can guide a society from a leadership perspective in a way that leads to non-violence, but in a way also that is able to convince people, in a way that is able to lead people to make certain decisions for the greater good of the common society, then it means each and every member of society then has a role to play in the overall attainment of that particular strategy. So I think that's the significance that I take from this role. He saw a need to address each segment of society, including a segment that is quite polarizing, which is the church, Christianity, religion, and spirituality at large. Lesson 3 speaks to subduing fear. In a time where Steve Biko was alive along with his peers, a lot of the generations of now would feel what they had to succumb was insurmountable. A lot of us would be overwhelmed by the level of negative deflection coming our way, by the level of corruption that existed then, by the level of violence, discrimination, segregation, and injustice that was existent at that particular point in time. It was a tough time to be in. But Steve Biko highlights in chapter 12 that people should use intelligence and not force to overcome particular downfalls in their lives. And the role of intelligence is that no matter how big the fear may seem, no matter how challenging the situation may be, you, in your infinite thinking capability and in your infinite imagination, you'll be able to come up with solutions to whatever that fear is trying to drown you into. You'll be able to come up with solutions no matter how difficult the apartheid regime is. What is your apartheid at this particular point in time? What is your fear that you need to overcome at this particular point in time? What is your challenge that you need to overcome at this particular point in time? Steve, in that time, said, do not succumb to fear. Do not be powerless against the powers that come against you. Instead, find it within yourself to find solutions to problems so that you come out tops. That's what the lesson I took from chapter 12, where he speaks to not allowing power to actually drain you of your ability to overcome fear and to overcome the particular forces that are coming against you. The perfect example of Steve showing immense fearlessness was him in chapter 12 addressing a number of white people congregated along with black people, with white people being the majority within the crowd. He addresses them truthfully and honestly, highlighting all the challenges that exist within the black community, and also how all the white people are polarized to the idea of a black person being equal to them. He tells them straight to their face while he's on the podium. He tells them how a lot of them actually don't like the fact that apartheid is being unjust towards black people, but they still vote the National Party in, and he states all the reasons. And unfortunately for the people listening, he is unfearful about it. He is downright straight to the point, attacking with truth, attacking with honesty, but also attacking with intelligence, giving reasons and justifications for all the things that he's putting forth, lest it be seen as accusations that will actually not feature in a solution-based approach. So face your fear, face your apartheid, face your injustice, come out using intelligence and power and not fear and powerlessness. Lesson 4 speaks a bit to empathy and understanding of other people's situations. In chapter 5, Steve Biko attacks the notion of black souls in white skins. Now, let me bring it closer to home. We live in a time where when you make it as a young black person, the first thing you're advised to do is to leave the hood, leave the environment, leave the ghetto, leave the township, an environment that is almost considered toxic because of the pull him down or pull her down syndrome that exists. So what happens is that Steve Biko is attacking the notion of an identity crisis that will almost always exist. As a black person, you live in a white man's suburb, you enjoy amenities that are easy to access. You take your kids to the best of schools because that's what you've been indoctrinated into and have been inculcated into thinking about. You also consider the depth and width with which you are working day in, day out to make sure that you provide for your family and your surroundings or the people within your close contact, proximity, niche, and nucleus, right? So this means that this identity crisis existed back then when the white people back then in the apartheid times were actually knowing and seeing what was happening in terms of the government. But at the same time, they wanted to protect how they were living and their white privilege at the time. It doesn't make it right in any way, shape, or form, but it does say that with an identity crisis that exists, us as society must look at things not from one perspective, but also from another perspective, from the other person's perspective. Be empathetic regarding how the next person sees a particular situation in comparison to how you see a particular situation. But at the same time, link it back to lesson 1, where it stems to you never forgetting who you are and your identity and how you build up who you are and the people around you in the process of becoming better as a community. Lesson 5 simply speaks to finding solutions to problems. Steve Biko's battle back then, Bantu stands, discrimination, injustice, apartheid as a whole, and the system as a whole, the fight was clear. So they had to come up with solutions to existing problems. The problem was right there in their face, it couldn't be hidden, and they needed to act and do something about it. Now, in your life and times, what is the problem that you need to solve? A lot of us complain about the corruption that exists with the ANC. We complain about every wrong thing that is happening in government, but we're not actually trying to find solutions to the problems. We're not informing ourselves. We're not going out there and taking actions to solve these particular problems that we complain about day in, day out. We complain about Eskom and the lack of electricity that comes our way, but we're not taking action towards that specific thing that we need to act on. unfortunate as it is, it's for us to do the right thing and act upon it. Therefore, we need to find solutions to these problems. We not only focus and zone in on the problem, but look to possible solutions. This also goes out to people that say the only option is ANC and thus they'll only vote ANC. For me, that's a sad way of looking at things, because until you see what the alternative Black Party can do, you have nothing to truly judge them on, whereas we've had almost 3 decades to judge the ANC on. Currently, the biggest problem we have is the ANC. So what are you going to do about it? How are you going to steer the ship of the community, of the country that you live in the right direction? For who? For your family and for yourself. How are you going to drive the narrative to suit you and to suit those around you? It starts with you guys. I hope I was clear enough in extrapolating the lessons from this book. I think I'm going to do another take and take further lessons, because I am revisiting the book time and time again, because I do say I resonate with it a lot. I wish you all the best in identifying your lessons if you do go out there and buy it, and but also in finding solutions to problems, because ultimately it starts with you and I. It starts with you and I at the end of the day. I love you. I appreciate you. Cheers, guys.
Ngithi nanga lamaphupho